All right. Okay, so Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. By the way, what rivers? Since we just did the map yesterday. Tigris and the Missouri. Yes. Tigris and the Euphrates River. That's all Mesopotamia means. Is the land between the rivers. And so think about it. The bad weather after the Ice Age. There's drought, shortage of food. People in the mountains competing for the limited food they had came down from the mountains to the river valleys. And it was tough, hot, miserable, but there was a source of water, relative fertile soil, and mud. So civilization was built on mud. So let's get to this really quick. Did we get to here? So that's Mesopotamia. And the thing about it was, summers were dry, but in the spring, every spring, there would be a flood. What does the flood do? So the flood, the combination of brings silt, which irrigates or will fertilize the soil. But it also, if you can trap it, you can make reservoirs to last through the dry summer. Now, reservoirs are bad. In the long run, can be bad because water evaporates and leaves salty, brackish water that you fertilize, and eventually you kill the soil with. And you might think, well, we would never do that now. Go to California. And that's where you get, the dams, small dams. They're not damming the Tigris River, but damming the channels that would be created by the flood, making canals to carry it. And so this is complicated, not only engineering feats, but you have to cooperate. You can't do it alone. You have to work together. Thus, these bands would form bigger cities, and then eventually you get a big man and that kind of thing. And Sumer being one of the first. Why Sumer? Or Sumer, the southern area. That is where you have reeds. There's more food there than the northern part of the Tigris and Euphrates River. They begin to make mud, dry it, make cities. Yes, it would wash away the first rain, not that it rained a lot, but that's where they started making ceramics, and they would use pottery, and they would flat. And once you get that, it's just a quick jump from taking this mud and superheating it the best they can to metallurgy, and kind of revolutionary how that's going to happen. And also, don't forget, they're incredibly smart, they're observant, and they're always looking for a way to make their incredibly difficult life easier. But we do that, but we have an element of that here, but we are also slaves to our technology, so we allow the technology to do that. And so when I was watching all of you, taking the iReady test, and those of you who had to take it, and the internet kept going down, or it's freezing, how we're all slaves to the technology. So if it goes down, then our civilization dies. So irrigation about 5,000 BC, and almost immediately started having food, a massive food surplus. Now, there was food surplus before. At Jericho and other places, they had that food surplus. But with irrigation and the soil that had been freshly, essentially fertilized with that silt, really good, rich soil, you're that bottom line. And they had incredible crop yields. So grains that they were doing further north, they brought down to the river valleys, and grain, millet, got rid of the seeds that tasted bad, kept the seeds that tasted good, and so on and so on. And with that food surplus, you start seeing 4 really big cities. Ur was one of the biggest, so we put that one down on your map. And Kish was a little bit further north. And Kish would become dominant because once they start developing that civilization, well, at least not quite dominant, but a little more powerful. It was kind of a broader plain. It wasn't so much of a delta, more land for crops. The delta, more swampy, reeds, alligators, really mean donkeys. Donkeys can be mean, by the way. Anyone been around donkeys? Donkeys are mean. I don't blame them, kind of. Not as mean as llamas. You know what else mean? Crocodiles.
Of course, the crocodiles are.
So in the center of town, they built mountains, but it came back as a city. And in the center would be the temple. And the temple would be the center of all religious, political, economic activity. That would be the center. So you have this combination of government and religion. We'll get to the religion in just a second, but all there at the temple. And by stacking these bricks, especially when they start superheating the bricks so they lasted longer, they can start making massive temples. So we're talking at first 20 or 30 feet, and then pretty soon 70, 80, 90 feet high. And the thing about that is, if you have people then all over coming down from the mountains or living in mud huts, and they all of a sudden come to Ur, and they see an 80-foot temple, what's their first thought? These people are so powerful. They are so strong. I better join them. It's way to intimidate. What did the Romans do the first time they went to an area?
Build statues.
Yeah, they built statues, a big theater, an arena. Why? Look how strong we are. I mean, the U.S. hasn't done that. Every colonial power does that. So, and it must have been amazing. If you go to medieval Europe, if you go to Europe and see this, the church cathedral that's 100 feet high, the tower, that's it.
Yeah. Medieval Europe.
We're going all over the place. When you go to Europe and see the old cathedrals and realize that there was nothing even close to that size, that would have said, wow, that king is powerful, but also that could say the church is powerful. Look at what we could do.
A lot bigger.
What's that?
I think our cathedral was like a lot bigger.
St. Helen was bigger than, it dwarfs St. Peter's.
No, I think ours is bigger. I think ours is a lot bigger. The one that we have in town last.
Yeah, it's big, yeah. St. Helen is big.
Yeah.
It's bigger than St.
Oh, is it
Peter's.
actually bigger? Okay, that's what I was gonna say. There's no
Not
way
even
it's
close.
bigger.
If you go like to St. Peter's in Rome, it is like, well, Vatican. It's kind of shocking how big it is.
But no
They have
one-
spots, and you're walking in, and it says, this is where, Notre Dame is, and you're not even near how big it is. It's wild. I'll show you, when we get there, I'll show you some pictures of that. It's pretty cool. So a couple more things here. And then very quickly, once you have things like food and other material, other people might want this. So what do you build? A wall. So you start getting these walled fortified cities with farms outside the city. So you have this whole elaborate structure. And if someone attacks, you run to the city. What did I say? You want me to move? And then what was the main diet? We don't know when bread was created. Unleavened, no yeast bread, so think about like flat bread. And it was pretty hard, pretty stiff. And at first ground together with rocks, but eventually a mill. And we will see some granaries a little bit later on, but a millstone being turned usually by horsepower or people walking in a circle. Volunteers. And I'm always really curious how they did that. I mean, wonder what, okay, we're trying to find someone to make this hard thing taste better. But they started cooking meat, so they must have just kind of lumped it together with some water, threw it in. They're like, oh, it kind of is bread. And then they just kept playing with it and got bread. Hard, a little bit of protein, and then the other main source of food was onions, because onions were really used in the home. You grow onions anywhere. No potatoes, that's something in the New World. Yes.
So you said the temple being 80 feet tall, sharing a lot of power.
Pyramid's going to be twice as big.
Yeah. Just can't make it this way.
But the pyramids aren't mud.
Right.
So the pyramids are bold.
Right.
But quarry stuff.
I mean, like coming across that.
Must have been amazing.
Yeah.
Look at our power. And so, like, you go down to where the Mayan pyramids in, like, Belize, and they're unreal how big they are.
Right.
Same deal. Look how strong we are. Yeah. Quick run. You see the same thing. You go to Scotland, between Scotland and England, they built this big wall across the Romans did. Or think of the Great Wall of China. It's not that the wall kept anybody out. It's like, look how strong we are. We built this big wall. We have the same thing with weapons that we really can't ever use, but we have them. Look how powerful we are. We have, Minuteman III ICBMs in Montana. So the Ziggurat would be the name of the tower. The Ziggurat. And this is a remnants of one, this is a model of one near Ur, but there's a lot of them still exist. During three different wars since 1980, Iraq, Iran, what's called the Gulf War '91, and then the US invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003, a lot of these were destroyed. And it's a tragedy. But some have survived. And then when the US took Baghdad, a lot of these treasures would be looted. A lot of them ended up being bought by the owners of Hobby Lobby, and they just were forced to give them back. Yeah.
So Hobby Lobby, like super religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they said it was the beginnings of like the elements of Christianity. Abraham came from this area, and Christianity and Islam. So the priest, the high priest, would be elected. So they would elect this, which seems very interesting, but they elect and they would serve amount of time. The priest or the person in charge of the religious activities. And we'll get to the religion in just a second. And also the Ziggurat would have a granary. And the granary, if you keep the temperature relatively stable, wheat, the seeds or corn from the wheat can last 20 years if the temperature is stable. If it's really stable, you know it's going to be stable, you can have wheat from 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and it's still edible. They found some wheat in archaeological sites that they made bread out of. And that are 2,000 or 3,000 years old. So what a valuable commodity that is. I'm not ready to eat it, but they did it.
So they found wheat like 3,000 years ago. They still did it to make bread.
Yeah.
They bread. What do they do with the bread? They eat it?
They ate it, yeah.
This is a temple, not
Why?
Why not?
Yeah, it's like
They made unleavened bread, so nobody. They would discover yeast. They would discover yeast about maybe. They've been using yeast, but yeast, they discovered, wow, if you leave it out in the air, this stuff's floating in the air that gets into the bread and makes it rise. Yeast is just floating around. So we swallow and eat yeast all the time. So what are you doing? Nothing. Don't play poker. Nothing. Great. Nothing. Okay. All right. So with that, and from there, they would commission other people to do construction. They would do construction from there. And so they would organize the people to build the walls, build more ziggurats, build buildings, build granaries. This would become the center of all life here. And here is one of the gods. By the way, you notice the great eyes. Boy, I wish everyone looked like this. But, darn it, just me. So this is where you get the concept of public works. So the people organized together for the public good. Now let's be clear about it. It's the public good is the granary, but a lot of times it'll also be it's the public good for the priest. The priest will be elected. We got to talk about when people come in the room.
Are we doing this again?
Yeah, we got to do that.
Okay.
So as I've said before, everybody's out to get it. I'm not paranoid. But it's a fact. When you look at those raisins.
Did you think
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
someone
sad.
trying
That
to
was
get
like
you
a-
or something?
That was like they put a horse head in my bed. That's what the moth. Yeah, you know. But. So there's always somebody out to get me. Or they might run me over on their trip to the bathroom. But. So if somebody comes in unannounced, what do we have to do?
Assassin.
We have to yell assassin. We'll operate on the assumption that they're an assassin out to get me. They put a knife in my back. Right?
You guys didn't yell assassin.
So you have to yell assassin. If it's in an administrator, you have to yell assassin, then hide under the desk. Right? That's just science. Are
I
you
guess
good with
like we
this?
should enter something one day and just.
That actually is so funny.
The best is a few years ago, the Small Education Foundation week. And the superintendent. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
We can tie it to the desk.
So do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Let's act like I'm a stranger.
Assassin.
Okay, well done. Some of you did not yell, and so you're clearly part of the plot against me. And I will note that, right? Right. So I will leave again, and let's take care of it.
You want us to get away?
Don't say it.
Do you want us to get underneath the table?
I better shut the camera off. All right, so here we go. Public works. So let's get, so you have this city, I mean, they're really starting to form this amazing series of construction. And for the time period, it's really fast. And yes, I know there's a period of technological change that seems like it's really fast now, but didn't have that change the world like today. And part of the thing is, one invention leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And once you start inventions, then it becomes like, oh, and breeds more innovation and it moves faster. So you notice as time goes by, what might take years, soon will take a couple years to literally just minutes. That's because inventions breed, or innovation breeds innovation, and everybody who invents is standing on the shoulders of others. That's Isaac Newton's line. I'm standing on the shoulders of greatness. And so here is where, so near Urk, this is in the Shia Muslim area near Basra. So almost like 50 miles up the river on the Tigris, and that's remnants of one of the ziggurats. And it's kind of hard to see there, but we're talking over 3,000 BC, so we're talking 5,000 years ago. It's remarkable. There's elements are still there. It's pretty unstable because it's mud, and one of the things about mud, even though it starts to collapse, and so you get this kind of look here. But we saw the same thing in the New World, and all over like the Mississippi, all over the Mississippi River. They had these mounds that various American Indian tribes built. And when disease killed them, when the United States came in, they thought, why are these strange black mountains all over? They didn't realize that they had been built by the people who lived there. Same thing here. They thought, why is this weird mountain here? Oh, it's not a mountain. So when I was in a place called Tulum, which is in the Yucatan, with this place called Coba, which is a Mayan village, and for years they had these massive pyramids that were 100 feet high, and they had been covered by jungle because the Mayans had basically left about 1300 AD, 300 CE, and they thought, why are these mountains here? These flat, weird humps. By the way, if you go to Berlin, they have the same thing. These weird humps in the city. A little bit different reason. Anybody know why?
First of all, the railroad, the big mountains have to be bombed. Well, like Britain has bombed Berlin to the ground.
Yeah,
And
you
it's
said-
level.
Yeah,
Like big hills.
they just pile the rubble up, and there's these
They
mountains,
go
and they're nothing but rubble from the war.
Sorry, they're not rubble areas, they're mountains.
Yeah, you go to the Berlin Zoo, this is a big mountain. It's all rubble from the war. Couple of, and so, the point is, this is not a new phenomenon. So, or old, but just old. So the gods, polytheistic means what? How many gods?
Multiple.
Yeah, multiple. We know there's elements, we have bits of it. And you see a lot of this type of religion, and definitely Christianity, and therefore, or Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all start from this polytheistic tradition, and they'll go to monotheist, one God. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because early on in the Quran, which becomes the Old Testament, they talk about two, then they go to one, because they all came from that same area. It's kind of interesting that you can see the roots of it. And here are some Sumerian gods. Now these are actually soldiers. For some reason I thought they were kind of cool. That is a Sumerian leader, and to show that you're close to God, you would use the new bronze tools and shave your head. So everyone had shaved heads. But they like onions, so there must be a tie in there. Onion shaved head. And so for a couple of the gods, I'm going to butcher this because I actually, this might shock you. I don't speak Sumerian very well. I grew up in Mile City, so we had a very, very cosmopolitan education. Big Sumerian influence there. But, so Utu, sound good? Happy with Utu? So that's the sun god. Every major religion at least starts with a sun god. And Nana. Moon. Ishtar, and you'll see something very close to Egyptian gods here. And so there's a tie-in, and that's love. And women are going to be worshipped for fertility. So you see, Ishtar was usually shown as a female. There's also El-In. There's a few other gods. And my favorite, Tammuz, the underworld. I don't know what I was going to test there, but I just thought this is kind of interesting how you see the same kind of connection. You see similarities, and they appear to be pretty human, with human traits. So there's an element of this that seems close to what the Greek god. Have you ever studied any Greek mythology or Roman mythology? There seems to be a tie, which would make sense. Because as they swept in through Asia Minor, they went across the Dardanelles and then. And so with that, so here's a couple pictures of various gods. On the left is God in the middle, that's carrying offerings for the gods. There would be sacrifices, and it would start as kind of human sacrifices. Usually women would do the sacrifice, that's what people believe, they would sacrifice men. But then when men also figured out, hey, we're the fathers and we're taking our own stuff, that would change the sacrifices of animals. Probably. And then most of the sacrifice would be symbolic. And you see elements of that in virtually every religion. You know, there's an altar where the sacrifice is done and now it's something else. I mean, you see those elements. But they were almost certainly sacrificing animals. But that's the thing, if you go to the Mayans, they were sacrificing people on those monuments.
They like shove them off something.
Sometimes, sure.
Show them off something.
Oh, I remember in World War II, this instrument being in the
Oh, are you talking about like the temples they shoved down the stairs?
Yeah.
But a lot of times, see, what they would do for that is the Aztecs, they would use a rock scalpel, cut the heart out, which is really hard to do. It took me years to. But and you'd hold the heart out, and everybody would cheer, and then you push the bottom. And then what? And then next.
Sacrificing llamas is cool enough.
No, I like
I wonder if they
llamas.
have some like rolling pins at the bottom.
So that, and you'll notice something. So here's the scribe, turn an offering to the god, and there's an element. Their eyes must be very hard to make. Like hands are really hard. That's why you have all the picture of guys like this. His hands are really hard to draw. And this one appears to be more abstract, so that's trying to show us like divinity in some way.
Those eyes.
The eyes are awesome.
Looks like two different ways.
And here is where you start getting the priest who's elected. Well, starting in Kish, the priest started saying, you know, yeah, you might have elected me, the priest, but I'm actually close to God. And I'm not going to give it up and have another election. And they became the big man of Kish. And the big man we call Kish, where do you think king came from? Big man. No, Kish, yeah. And so here is the big man taking the offerings. And by the way, what's that?
Altar gone.
That almost looks like a god.
It's not a god.
It's sun, but it also represents something else. The power they have to control when things happen. Early calendars. It's supposed to represent, I'll show you another calendar down the road. Think about that as a calendar.
Oh. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Calendars are almost always drawn as round. Yes.
Is this the same place that like the rivers flood at the same time?
Yeah. Not exactly so. Like Egypt is literally on that day until they built the high echelon dam. And they pretty much almost destroyed Egypt. That's kind of a secret. Dams are pretty amazing things in a way, but they also do some pretty bad things. And so let's look at the technology they're able to develop. What are those? Okay, these are some of the technology. Let's go through them. I just thought this was a symbol of we have military, moving. I like this one. They were able to make models of things. Obviously, a model of a plow, yes. So let's get to it. So first off, we have the first musical instrument. You start seeing a harp and a lute being made. Also, some of the first boats. And eventually you can have what we're going to call a galley, which are with rowers, or a trireme. We'll go into more detail about those going down the road. But think about it, you're on a river, you need boats, and it starts with a canoe once you have an axe, and pretty soon these pretty amazing boats would have 1, 2, and 3 rows of rowers. By the way, most of them were not slaves. We'll mention this again. They were paid and very proud of their job.
So why were they called slaves?
Not the guys rowing. But you hear galley slaves a lot. You think, oh, there just had to be slaves because no one would ever do that. Well, in my generation, we understood that, no, that was like any job you would have that's a hard job where you take pride in. I'm doing this, look at me. And by the way, that had to be a hard job. But let's get to the other one. The beginnings of hydraulic engineering. And this is a shot, carving, ceramic carving from Lagash, which is a city a little bit north of They thought all the time about water. No way. And there's a couple really cool things about it, but they're clearly farming. That's supposed to be an irrigation ditch, but they're also, they're funneling fish into an area they can catch. Make sense? And then I love the fact that they're swimming. They show them, I guess, swimming, even though no one really knew how to swim until the 19th century, but people knew how to
feel like people would know how to swim earlier.
flop and then sink.
Yeah.
Yeah, swimming, as we know it, is relatively new, but they clearly must have, that's swimming, isn't it? Kind of like freestyle swimming.
Or they
And that's a development of the 19th century. Or what do you say?
On them the backs, and I think it looks so weird.
Yeah.
Like,
They
on
could be
the
just
back.
grabbing, reaching out for the fish.
Yeah.
But think about irrigation canals, something that you before. And once people saw the food they got, can you imagine how others like, we gotta get that. We gotta get that yummy unleavened bread and onions. Can you just imagine when they had something else, how good it must have tasted? Beetles. Okay, so the first contracts would be made. So they would take, they would all make these little like tokens. And let's say we made a business deal. So you give me a few of your tokens, I would give yours, and we would put it in this clay, basically kind of like a ball. And then when we want to figure out what we owe each other, we would break it, aka breaking the coin. A little bit more fish tomorrow. I think these are just amazing. All the things that would come out, because it would spread everywhere from China and Japan to England to, all over. It's amazing. And then we have to throw a water bottle.
Oh, yes, this is how human advancement has taken place. Go ahead, Tyler.
You have to throw your water bottle. And you're finally back.
Wait, Alex, one question. Do they have like speed bumps at this facility, or do they have monitors?
They don't have roads. They don't have running water.
Well, of course, it's bicycle bus.
I can't tell them because I've been to the East of the United States and people ask me.
We should go golfing.
Horses to school?
Okay.
You want to
I
go?
want to go meet tonight.
Oh.
Dude, this weekend.
Yeah, Corey.
Saturday.
I can say the same.
I've
I've been golfing like every week.
Why are you so
Oh,
far?
okay.
Yes. You ruined my mood.
What?
He was just talking about how happy he was.
See you tomorrow.
Sorry, Robin.
We have a video to watch.
Late for that, isn't it?
Oh, Lord. The internet's been going off, but maybe it's just because they're doing the test online. So we'll see if we have internet. We might not.
So no one's asked me since the start of this summer.
I'm leaving. Get to class. Look at my wrist.
I just want to see my picture.
I know, I was in that class. I did watch you.
Having some house guy.
He literally lectured me.
Oh, yeah. No, and he-
So I was
not
really
saying-
we were just like,
Yeah, he was like, I was saying it. What do you want to say? I was here, right? And you're just like,
Well, like, I'm gonna go, like, even like about